Today I'm going to show you how to open a 2006 Subaru WRX taillight. We are opening these so that we can install this alumistatic kit. This brown stuff is just paper, by the way. It will be more like this after this lens gets cleaned up. The first step to opening any light, headlights or taillights, is figuring out how it is sealed up. The way that you do that is by looking in between the back housing and the lens. And what you're looking for is some sort of material, either butyl or permaseal. Permaseal can be several different colors. In this case, it's gray. And if you poke it with a screwdriver, it really doesn't move anywhere. It's a pretty tough material to work with. Butyl, on the other hand, is very soft. I can even move it with just my fingers. The third style, which is what we're working with here, is plastic weld. As you can tell, there's no form of glue sticking out in between the lenses, and if you look in between, you can actually see where the two pieces of plastic are melted together. So since these are plastic welded taillights, we will be cutting them open. Now I'm going to show you the tools that you need. First thing that you'll need is a cutter. In this case, we like to use an ultrasonic cutter. It's very thin. It does cut kind of slow, but it creates such a thin cut that it's definitely worth using this. They are kind of expensive. They hover around $400. So a cheaper option is to use just a plain old Dremel. These you can get for like 70 bucks. We like to use the diamond bit. Diamond bit is pretty thin. This will make an insane mess, so we try to stick with the ultrasonic cutter instead. You can tell that we have an attachment on here. This attachment we have just because the Dremel here gets really, really hot. If you have the attachment on there, you can actually hold it for longer. Once you've cut the lights open, then you'll use various size screwdrivers. I like to use the pocket screwdrivers mostly to just get in there and kind of crack the lens open. If it's starting to give you some issues, you can use a bigger screwdriver, but this is where things typically start to break, and you do not want to break the lens because then you'll have to buy a whole new taillight. After you've pried the back lens off, you will need to get the inner housing out, so just a Phillips head screwdriver. Then you'll do all your modifications. Like I said, in our case, we're doing an entire alumistatic kit. You put everything back together, and then you are going to plastic weld the back housing to the front lens. This is really what's going to give it its strength back. Having those two pieces melted back together is very, very important. We do like to add some shoe goo after we plastic weld it, just for added security. Lastly, we will use some black silicone to make it completely waterproof. A few extra things that I like to use just to protect the light, and it's not really necessary, is I'll use cling wrap. Literally, I will just put cling wrap on the lens. This is just so that you don't have any scratches getting into the lens as you're working on it. You can actually lay it on its face at this point and not worry about it. Another thing is some sort of foam mat. Personally, I don't like setting lights directly onto a plastic or wood table. Just feels like something's gonna break sitting it on this hardwood. At this point, we've done enough work that I decided to go ahead and just cover the whole thing in foam. Not as thick as this stuff, but it does work pretty well, and it's grippy, so things don't really slide that easy on here. So the cut line that I'm gonna follow is just the natural mold line that these have. You can see where it kind of folds out like this. We're gonna cut right in there. That's gonna be the easiest place to cut, and it's gonna be a good spot to weld all of this back on. Once you get to the fin, it is gonna have to cut up here and go around. The fin is completely molded on, so you can't actually get down in there. I've actually found that it's okay. This area is not too bad to work in if you cut up through here. Okay, we got the back housing off. Time to release the inner housing. The way that we're gonna do that is by using our screwdriver to loosen up the screws, but I'm not gonna use a hand screwdriver. I'm going to use the impact with a screwdriver bit on it. We've got most of the screws out. There's one here, one there, and one, this one right here. Now, this one on ours is completely rusted out. Like, there's nothing for us to grab onto. So I have to use a vise or something, a pair of vice grips to get that off. I'm gonna start with just a pair of needle nose, see if I can get it off with that. Oh, that's not working. Okay, we're gonna turn it from a Phillips head screw to a flathead screw. Now we should be able to use just a regular flathead screwdriver. Got it. Now we can take the inner housing completely out. go. That is the whole inner housing, and I'm going to modify this to hold the alumistatic kit. Okay, I've done all of our work. Now it's time to put it together. I have already set the back housing on. I pulled my wires through. Now what I need to do is actually get this back housing to sit a little more flush, and then we are going to plastic weld it back together. Okay, now let's go ahead and get this back housing seated back down. I'm gonna go ahead and do several different tack welds in here to hold it all together as I put the rest of the back housing. Now, since we added an entire extra LED board on the inside, it's not gonna sit all the way flush without a little bit of encouragement. So I'm gonna go ahead and clamp this back in place so that we can get this whole thing welded back properly. Okay, I've got several tacks in here. I was able to take off the clamp, and obviously it is still holding together. So now what I'm gonna do is weld out the rest of this and all of this as well, and we'll move on to the next step. This light is completely plastic welded. Now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and add a couple of dabs of shoe goo or goop. Now the plastic weld should hold it, but this is just some added security. You know, it's an adhesive, and last thing you want is for your lens to fall off while you're driving. So go ahead and add a couple of dabs of this. All right, next step is to put the silicone on it. This is gonna make it completely waterproof. Now you just gotta let that cure up. And since we didn't cut in between the lens and the back housing, we do not have to do any sort of paint work on the front, which is extremely nice. Well, personally, while this is curing up, I'm going to go ahead and do some wiring.